Good afternoon. My name is Lieutenant Colonel George Bivens, Deputy Commissioner of Operations with the Pennsylvania State Police. Joining me today is District Attorney Deb Ryan, FBI ASAC Jamie Milligan, and Rob Clark from the U.S. Marshals. As I told you yesterday, this investigation has taken a change in direction in terms of the allocation of resources and daily focus of investigators. We have moved from a containment model to one which involves utilizing a variety of investigative resources and which has proven successful for us in the past. We continue to receive tips and information from the public and are following up on those. Additionally, the public can expect to see a significant law enforcement presence in the area of East Nantmeal Township, where the van was recovered, as well as other areas of northern Chester County. There is no need for alarm when those resources are observed. If a possible threat develops, we will use the reverse 911 system to notify affected residents. I'd like to address a message to anyone who may have already offered assistance or is contemplating assisting Cavalcante in any way. We will prosecute you fully for those actions. Alternatively, I would suggest that you are in a position to help facilitate the safe capture of Cavalcante. If you choose to assist us, you could be eligible for some or all of the reward that has been offered for Cavalcante's capture. As a matter of fact, I'm announcing today that Chester County has increased the amount of reward they are offering by another $5,000. That brings the total reward offered up to $25,000 for information that leads to the capture of Cavalcante. We remain concerned that Cavalcante will attempt to steal another vehicle to facilitate his escape. As a reminder, we ask for the public's help by familiarizing themselves with the updated photographs and description of Cavalcante, to check security cameras they have, and to call us immediately if they believe they may have seen him. Again, we ask residents to please secure homes, outbuildings, and vehicles. It is imperative that anyone with information about Cavalcante contact us immediately so that we may act on that information in a timely manner. Anyone with information is asked to call our tip line at 717-562-2987. 717-562-2987. I know this is an extremely stressful time for the community. We are doing everything possible to bring this to a successful resolution as quickly as possible. I and all of us working on this every day appreciate all of the support that all of you have given. Thank you very much for that support. And at this time, we will be happy to take any questions you might have.
Do you have evidence that someone has tried to help him? Or is that why you've arrested the sister?
The sister is an overstay, and she chose not to assist. And because of being in an overstay status, she has been entered into a deportation proceeding and is being detained at this time.
She chose not to assist. You wanted her to help you, she did not.
She has not assisted.
Do you have any evidence of anybody else who's tried to help him? And you just put a warning out there. Do you have people who you know of who did try to help him?
I'm cautioning people preemptively, and yes, we are monitoring. We are monitoring for any possible help in a variety of ways. And so what I would tell you is that if we detect assistance, that will be prosecuted. I'm not going to say anything further than that in terms of who may or may not have. What I'm going to say is, as a warning, you will be prosecuted. There is an alternative path to try and assist with his safe capture.
I want to touch base on the timeline here to make sure that we're correct. So he shows up at these homes 10:30, you think, Saturday night, but yet people in the neighborhood say police weren't making checks until well after 2 o'clock in the morning. Was there any kind of delay here? The people at the church tell us that people didn't start looking around the church till 3 a.m.
We weren't notified until well after midnight of the sightings.
So 2 hours after he shows up at this house and has a conversation with
At least 2 hours.
Were there issues with 911 with that call from that family on the Ring doorbell camera? Were there any issues? And can you walk us through? Can you actually just walk us through that entire sequence?
I'm not aware of any issues with the 911 system, And I'm not going to comment further. What I'm going to tell you, I've already laid out what the timeline was, and what I would tell you is that the individuals, for example, the one was not home at the time. They were utilizing a doorbell to speak with him. They arrived home sometime later, reviewed the video, and contacted local police. Whatever occurred there, we were not a part of it. We received the notice, and I gave you the time yesterday. I don't have it in front of me, but it was sometime around 12:30, as I recall, so after midnight when we received the notice, and our investigators then began working on that information.
These are the only two places that you believe he was, because we have neighbors in another Phoenixville neighborhood telling us that there was a heavy police presence, that he was knocking on doors in that neighborhood as well.
Those were the only two that we have reports that he communicated with anyone.
Lieutenant Colonel, at this point, have there been any other visual confirmed sighting from since this doorbell photo was released?
There have not.
Do you have any reason to believe that he's just vanished without a trace? Do you still believe he's within Pennsylvania?
Well, of course he hasn't vanished without a trace, and for a variety of reasons, yes, I do believe that he is in Pennsylvania.
How many law enforcement personnel do you have working on this now, and have you brought in additional resources?
That total right now is still probably hovering around the 300 mark, and yes, we have brought in additional resources, so we're switching some out. I described yesterday that today, as a matter of fact, we had planned a major push, and so there were a lot more uniform resources, there were tactical teams, a very large number of tactical teams, and a lot of other assets that would have been utilized. We have instead replaced some of those resources, certainly not all, with other investigative resources, because as I told you, the investigation has shifted, and so not only the state police, but our federal partners as well have brought in additional resources that we believe will be useful going forward. We collectively conduct fugitive investigations every day of the year, and so this one is at a little different scale, but it's the type of investigation each of our agencies works on a very regular basis, and we're now adjusting with the resources we believe we need.
Why weren't there assets at these acquaintances' homes before he made this appearance, and are you doing that moving forward in this investigation?
Well, when you say acquaintances' homes, what I would tell you is that these people had not, to my knowledge, had any contact with Cavalcante for years. So they were not friends, they were prior work associates, for example, and they were not people that we would have expected or that we would have known even to contact, again, from the distant past.
Sir, any thoughts on raising a reward to $50,000 or $100,000 to help bring him to justice sooner rather than later?
Well, no, again, right now we're announcing that the reward is at $25,000. I do believe that's a lot of money. I'm hard-pressed to believe that someone is sitting out there with information saying $25,000 is not enough. I suppose we'll consider things as we go forward, whether that will increase or not. But for right now, that seems to be a pretty reasonable amount, I think.
So with the reward, with no defined area to search, are you 100% reliant on public tips in order to find him?
No.
There's been a lot of reports or rumors, I should say, that Cavalcante's sister previously was seen near the search perimeter in a U-Haul or some other type of vehicle. Is there any credence to that led to her arrest?
No, I've heard those reports. Her arrest was, again, because she is an overstay. That was a process that would play out for anyone in her same circumstance. And what I would say is she has failed to cooperate, and so there was no value in law enforcement keeping her here at this point.
Through the communications with the sister and acquaintances, what do you know about the resources he may have, cell phone, money, food? What is he asking these people? And can you kind of divulge what kind of intelligence you gathered in terms of what...
No, I don't want to talk specifically about what I think he may or may not have or what he's looking for. Those are all pieces of our investigation. But I think it's, again, fair to say what I've said all along, and that is he needs additional help, he needs resources for the long run, and he is seeking those.
Sir, have you expanded the search for Berks County at all?
We don't have a defined search area at this point. We are considering and certainly acting on and investigating any piece of information or tip that we receive. And so we follow those pieces of investigation, pieces of information with our investigation, as we have done right from the very start, regardless of where they are. There are areas that I described, for example, in East Nant Mill Township, for example, that may have a little more of our focus of some of our resources that are more visible. But again, that certainly is not a limiter at all for everything else that we're doing.
Speaking generally, why do you still believe he's in Pennsylvania?
Because I have no reason to believe that he is not. I don't believe he has the resources to get out of Pennsylvania. And again, other pieces of information that we have generated within this investigation lead me to believe that he is still here.
Does he have any other family members here? Does he have any other family members here that you've contacted?
I'm not going to talk about who we've contacted. He does still have some family and friends in the area, and we are aware of those.
Lieutenant Colonel, why arrest his sister now? She previously testified at his trial in cooperation with prosecution. I assume her immigration status was known earlier in August. Why arrest her this week, or last week?
From my perspective, and while I don't have anything to do with the removal process, there is no reason for me to try to interfere in that process, because she serves no value to the investigation, and she potentially could provide assistance. And I'm not confident that she would not in the future if we let her out there.
Can you talk about what led to the activity we saw last night? You said since the doorbell camera there weren't any confirmed sightings. Could you expand on that a little bit?
We continue to receive a significant number of tips, and so again, we will follow up on all of those. We have things that we are doing proactively, and so you may see some activity as a result of that. We have, and I said there are other things that may not be so obvious that you won't see that are going on as well.
What kinds of challenges is law enforcement facing in the search efforts in terms of terrain? I mean, obviously it's a very rural area, and you spoke about yesterday how he was able to manage his way outside of the perimeter. So what kind of challenges are we facing as we're heading into?
Very similar challenges in terms of the search efforts, very similar challenges to what we have faced previously to this point. Unfortunately, we don't have a containment area right now, so that's another, another concern and another challenge. But again, we're working through all of that, trying to pull together pieces of information so that we can narrow a search area and ultimately use those tools to be able to capture him.
How did he slip out of the previous search warrant?
As I said yesterday, I don't have a definitive answer on that. I have my theories of how that happened. I have those theories because I'm aware of the weaknesses that were in there. I explained yesterday that no perimeter is 100% secure. It's not a wall. It doesn't have a ceiling. It doesn't have, all of the things that you might normally use if you're trying to contain someone. We use the human element. We use technology and so forth to be able to try and secure the perimeter as best we can. I am aware of some of the weaknesses. Longwood Gardens presented some very unique challenges, and I believe he exploited one of those weaknesses.
Do you believe any mistakes were made that allowed him to get out of that perimeter?
I don't know that I would characterize it as a mistake. As I said, again, without knowing specifically what happened, what I would tell you is that I had concerns. I knew that there were weaknesses in that perimeter. It was a very strong perimeter as far as perimeters go, but there are always weaknesses, and that place posed some very unique challenges. Perhaps when this is all over, I can talk about some of those, but it was a very difficult place to try and secure.
Is it more of a challenge, Lieutenant Colonel? You've got a far bigger area and no perimeter, and you really haven't gotten them locked in.
Well, sir, we conduct, as I indicated, we conduct fugitive investigations every day of the year across this Commonwealth, as do our partners that are standing here with me. Each one of them poses a challenge. We are most often very successful in those. Most don't lead to a protracted search like this. I am confident that using all of those resources, we will ultimately bring this one to a successful conclusion as well.
Sir, it is September 11th. Any thoughts to the men and women that are on the ground with you, federal, state, and county law enforcement and local law enforcement working together this day over the last 12 days searching for this convicted killer who's on the run?
Certainly today is a day of remembrance, and our thoughts and prayers go out to the victims of 9/11. But what I would tell you is that the men and women that are working here on this investigation are not pausing or taking a break. They are actively working and doing their jobs because that's what people expect them to do.
I have a question for Rob Clark as far as how the marshals are now investigating. You mentioned before before this was like a game of tactical game, cat and mouse. What changes now for your guys that are out there looking for it?
That's a good question. So, in the beginning, we were prepping here for the short game. We had a tactical response prepared in a certain area, and while that response was being prepared, we had a group of investigators from the U.S. Marshal Service here, some of the brightest minds in the agency, having a contingency plan of what we were going to do should he break perimeter or if he was outside that perimeter. So we had proactively planned for this, and I would say, we have our pre-operational planning set, our tactical resources, our technical resources were all brought here, and now we're planning for the long game. The search in the woods was to Cavalcante's advantage. He was in an 8 square mile area that with very difficult terrain, that was very difficult to get to, and there were some weaknesses in the perimeter. I think the incident command here was great, setting up the perimeter, bringing in the resources, and doing the absolute best we could. We had, I think, over 200 law enforcement officers in or around that perimeter. But now we're going to prepare for the long game. And the long game is what we do best. The U.S. Marshal Service, like the Colonel said, does fugitive investigations every day. This is a manhunt. And all that means to us is that it's a longer fugitive investigation with more resources. So we are prepared.
Cavalcante playing your game now?
I'm sorry?
Is Cavalcante playing your game now?
Cavalcante is now, I think the advantage has switched to law enforcement. Before it was advantage Cavalcante while he was playing that tactical hide and seek in the woods. Now I believe it's advantage law enforcement because he's in an urban setting. And that's what our investigators do best, the U.S. Marshal Service investigators, and we're force multiplied here by these other federal, state, and local agencies. So I believe the advantage has switched to law enforcement.
The fact you
So
call
what
this
do
the
you do?
long.
What is it that you do in this long game, in this urban setting? What changes? You go door to door? How do you look?
Well, there's a lot of different investigative techniques. I don't want to specify exactly what they are, but we're going to do the same thing we do every day in the city of Philadelphia. We're going to go out, we're going to talk to people, we're going to utilize the assets of the U.S. Marshal Service, certain investigative techniques that I don't want to reveal, but we're going to try to stay one step ahead.
You
The fact
mentioned
that you call
weaknesses in the perimeter. Is that based on resources or was that geographical?
I'm sorry, the first part of your question?
You mentioned, you said that there were some weaknesses in the perimeter.
Right.
Was that based on resources or was that more
Well,
geographical?
maybe I misspoke, not weaknesses. There were a lot of challenges inside the perimeter. I believe the Lieutenant Colonel said yesterday, and he was very accurate because I've been in the inside of that perimeter. I was there with our investigators. There's a massive tunnel system. There's a lot of ravines. It's very, very thick vegetation there. It was a very, very difficult environment to maintain.
Sir, you could calling this the long game. Some people might think that means you don't expect to catch him soon. Is that the case?
No, I mean, we expect to catch him as soon as possible, but we're not going to put all our ducks in a row and say, hey, we're going to have him by this Thursday. We're going to plan for a long investigation because we don't want to get caught planning for an immediate arrest and then we're not prepared later down the line.
Sir, given that he's very close to potentially French Creek Park, another vast area, are you also concentrating more solely on nature, where he was successfully able to hide in the southern Chester County area, versus, where 202 and other routes, there's cameras everywhere, and that would be a way easier to find him in lieu of a cell phone or a debit card? Do you think he's in the woods right now still? Is
Well,
that his advantage?
Like the Colonel said, we're investigating that area in East Nantmeal. Until something suggests he's not in that area, we're going to continue to investigate there. I'd reiterate the message from the Colonel to the public. Please be vigilant in the areas that we're searching. Make sure your doors are locked. Make sure your car keys are secured in your residence. Report anything suspicious to law enforcement. And if you have tips, call them in because we'd like to investigate 100 bad tips rather than miss that one good tip that's not called in.
Lieutenant Colonel, you talked about a protracted search.
procure another vehicle since dumping the van?
Not that we're aware of.
You talk about a protracted search. Another one that comes to mind would be freeing nearly 10 years ago, went on for 40-some days. What are some of the similarities and differences between these two searches?
That's a question probably better for the Colonel.
Well, what I would tell you is every search has its challenges. Some of the similarities, large search area, very difficult to know exactly where he was. And I would tell you that almost 9 years ago to the day, some of you all were standing with me in that area up there. And some of these same questions were being posed. What makes us think we can catch him? He's a trained survivalist, and I would add that he had already shot 2 troopers at that point, and so it added another dimension to the whole thing. Some of those same challenges, some of those lessons learned from freeing have made us better as an agency, and we've taken those lessons and we adapt those here. There have been a number of searches between freeing and now. And again, we learn something from each one of those. We'll learn things from this search. In the end, collectively with our partners, we will be successful and we will capture him.
Colonel Bivens, I know that you have been continuing to say that you believe he's in Pennsylvania. Do you have any reason to believe that he's still in Chester County?
Again, without information to the contrary, yes, I believe he's in Chester County. But with that said, we always consider other options. You know, the marshal just said that we've had plans all along, and he's exactly right. We collectively have been discussing right from the very beginning, what if, what if, what if. It's, you know, when we can bring this group of experts that we've assembled here together, it makes for an amazing team. There are a lot of good ideas, a lot of planning for contingencies, and a lot of great resources that are put to work out there in the field every day. We're trying to use the talents of all of those people and make this a successful operation.
Lieutenant Colonel, I've seen a lot of reports of citizens arming themselves, sort of driving around the perimeter, expressing an interest in helping. Have you received any complaints or even made any arrests of people inappropriately walking through the perimeter or otherwise behaving inappropriately?
We have not made any arrests. We have received calls from others about some of those citizens. We've investigated again. We have not made any arrests. And I would ask again that people consider not doing that. They're interfering in our investigation of potentially drawing resources away from the task at hand. We don't want an unfortunate incident to cause anyone to get hurt.
Do you tell your folks that they should now assume that because of his contact in different places that he's armed, that he's obviously dangerous from his history, but now he's likely to have gotten a weapon somewhere?
We obviously have always treated him as being dangerous, and we have always treated him as potentially being armed. He's been carrying a pack. There's no way to know exactly what's in that pack or what he obtained early on in this investigation and search. And so we've always treated him as though he may be armed, and certainly with his history of being as dangerous as he is, having been charged with 1 homicide and now charged and convicted with a second, I think it's fair to say that he needs to be treated in that manner.
Where was the sister? The interaction with the ring.
I'm sorry?
Do you plan to release the ring camera interaction anytime soon for us to review?
I've not made a decision on that. I will tell you that it's in Portuguese, so it's not something that's easily reviewed anyway. It needs to be completely translated. We have done that for investigative purposes, but again, as I said yesterday, for me the focus was on getting these photographs out. They really are the thing that provides value, and you know, before we release full videos along with audio, we want to make sure that there's no impact on the investigation.
Yesterday you talked about a full sweep happening and doubling manpower and things of that nature. What does that full sweep involve? You also talked about training 600 people. I know you said earlier you have 300 people. What happened with those numbers there? What is this?
Well, you're misunderstanding. So what I was talking about was an operation that had been planned over the weekend to begin this morning, and was to sweep the entire secured perimeter of Longwood Gardens and the surrounding property within that perimeter. And so we had planned a very large operation in order to try and make sure we thoroughly searched those grounds. That was what I was talking about with those very large numbers. You know, the marshal mentioned, and I've alluded to them before, about the challenges in there. It is a unique place to search and really takes a lot of resources. You know, when some of those sightings occurred in there, we had skilled tactical teams in there from multiple agencies. And even then, it was problematic to try and capture him or to find him again once a brief sighting occurred. The cover is that dense, and just a multitude of places to hide.
Do people living in that area still need to be on guard? In Kennett Square, do they still need to be checking their surveillance?
I'm not afraid. What I am suggesting is that people should be vigilant. And I can't say that only people within some 1 square mile area someplace should be the only ones to be vigilant. As we saw, someone near the perimeter had a problem and left their vehicle unsecured with keys in it. That posed a problem. And so what I'm asking is that anyone, certainly in a very, it's a good practice anytime. They shouldn't be leaving their keys in the car. I'm just asking people to double down and be especially vigilant and make sure that they aren't doing things like that, particularly now when we're involved in this manhunt.
You said you had no containment area. Can you be specific? You don't have a containment area like you did previously near Longwood?
Yes.
Can you specifically, can you give us more specifics on that and talk about your new tactics and what new tactics?
So when I said there's no specific containment area, you saw at Longwood and in some other areas around here a very specific border that was formed by law enforcement so that we could search within that border. What I'm saying is that I have not formed a similar border, a physical presence to contain an area. We are, however, still conducting searches without identifying and securing a very specific area. We're conducting searches of some large areas of ground using some of those same tactical teams and other resources.
On the sister, which agency initially picked her up? Where was she initially picked up? And just to clarify, you said if released, you're concerned that she may help him again. Did she attempt to help him prior to being picked up?
I'm not going to discuss what she did with regard to helping him or not. What I would tell you is that she is in the custody of federal authorities, ICE, and we have no involvement in that, and so I don't have a lot of other information.
But you guys did not pick her up initially and then pass her off to us?
I don't know specifically how that played out. I just know that there was a discussion and an agreement here that proceeding could take place. I don't know who worked with ICE to get that done.
The sister to try to communicate with him, to get to him?
Well, again, I'm not going to talk specific tactics. We will use all available tools, and we are seeking the cooperation of any and everyone in order to bring this to a safe, successful resolution.
You shared that doorbell message you just said. What was he asking for specifically in regards to support?
What I'm going to say is, generally speaking, he was focused in that message about trying to meet with these individuals. As I said, they were not home. And so he was trying to arrange a meeting and to make sure that that would occur without anyone else present. There were some other discussions that I'm not going to go into, but that was really the biggest focus. Was he was trying to make contact and he was trying to solicit help.
Did he mention what location he wanted to meet at?
There was not a specific location identified. There were a couple of places talked about, but ultimately there was no agreement to meet.
Sir, in terms of canine support, we've seen some wonderful German Shepherd officers. Have you brought in bloodhounds?
We have. We have utilized a variety of canine types, and again, I rely on the expertise of our various canine officers to tell me what it is they need and what other resources they need, and we've acted on that as needed.
Do you have any idea why he was heading from Phoenixville area to East Mansfield Township and what his next move could be?
We have some theories about why that occurred, but and again, until he's captured and interviewed, we won't know that for sure.
Senator, what was the tone of that message? Did it seem urgent? Did he seem confident? Did he seem arrogant? That one photo that everyone looks at seems like there's a smirk on his face. Can you give us a sense of what that message sounded like?
I would characterize it as urgent but friendly. It was someone he clearly had not spoken to in some period of time, and so there was a reacquaintance and an effort to get assistance.
Did the sister work as a housekeeper in this area or any of the areas that you're searching?
I don't know.
So there's been a little confusion on the doorbell camera. So he arrives, he speaks into it.
Yes.
So the people whose home that is, do they have a conversation with him? Is it just he leaves a message in the ring camera?
They have a conversation with him.
They spoke back to him?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell us what they said to him?
Well, again, I characterize it generally as a reacquaintance and a discussion about trying to meet and to get some assistance.
And then they didn't tell you about it until several hours after that?
It was reported to the local police, and then the local police investigated, and ultimately what I'm saying is I was not a part of that, but there was a couple of hour period of time there before we became aware of it.
I talked to the people in that house. I talked to a family member of the people in that house. They say that they reported their conversation to police immediately. Is that true? And what explains that delay? Is that the local
I have no reason to doubt their account. I'm simply reporting to you the pieces that I have control or have knowledge of, and that is that we did not receive that information until about 12:30 that night. What steps the police department took to investigate that, whether there was, and I'm only speculating now, whether there was an issue or a concern because it was not in English, it was in Portuguese. I have not personally spoken to the officers. I know our investigators have. What I can tell you is that period of time lapsed before we became involved and became aware.
It's clear that he reached out to your former coworker. Have you made a list of other people he's worked with or had relationships with in order to contact them since the sister's not cooperating?
Certainly, any possible associates, family members, all of that are part of our ongoing investigation. The marshal alluded to the fact that there is a very thorough investigation. Much of that, if not all, was known even while we were working on the containment and capture model, again, as a contingency, should it be necessary.
Sir, any chance today that you'll be able to share, did you work in the mushroom houses here in Chester County or at Equestrian Farm? You seem somewhat familiar with the farms throughout the county here a bit. Any insight you can share in terms of where he was working in Chester County?
I've read pretty significant history on him, but I'm not prepared today to stand here and talk to you about all that work history. He's been here for some time. He does have some varied experience, but again, I'm not prepared to.
You're very calm when you talk about the delay between when your investigators learned about it. You talked about cooperation and the need for cooperation. It's got to be frustrating to hear that he was reported almost immediately, but then wasn't.
Well, as I've indicated, I don't know the circumstances of why that wasn't reported. Our investigators have looked into it. There was certainly, we're not looking at did somebody engage in misconduct or anything like that. And so those are the circumstances we're faced with. And so the best I can do is what I've done all along, and that is to ask whether it's law enforcement, whether it's the public, or any other agency that might come in contact with anyone that would and it would possess some information. Please get that information to us very quickly. That's the best we can do. We need people to cooperate, and that's what we're asking
Can
for.
you do a quick recap of the timeline? He escaped, they realized 2 hours later, the stolen van, the sighting on the range. Can you do a quick timeline?
Well, I don't have a timeline as far as he escaped. What we know is that that at some point that evening, that van was parked late afternoon, 4:30, 4:45, was the last time that the owner saw that vehicle. What I can tell you is that we know that at some point that night, we now know, and again, without the times here in front of me, at 9-something and around 10 o'clock or so, 2 different contacts occurred in East Pikeland and in Phoenixville. Those contacts were ultimately reported to law enforcement. We were made aware of those at around 12:30 that night into the next morning. We still did not know about the stolen van at that point. Based on all of the information we gathered from those 2 contacts, we started looking for the potential for a stolen vehicle using a number of pieces of information. Our investigators were able to conclude what type of a vehicle it might be, and we sought out owners of those vehicles kind of in close proximity to where we were, and with that we identified the owner of the vehicle, and they reported it stolen at that time. And so that all played out until 5 o'clock in the morning roughly, and again, I know we've talked about specific times. I'm just speaking from memory in the ballpark.
So it's believed that while he had the stolen van, he made the contact with the ring camera and another contact?
Yes.
Okay.
Has the government of Brazil sent anyone here to work with law enforcement on the ground in Chester County, or has the government appointed a point person from law enforcement in Brazil to answer your questions on call 24/7?
You know, no, the short answer is there is not a contact from the government of Brazil here. We do have, as a result of the prosecution that was done, the district attorney's office possessed really, I think, the information we needed in terms of his background and experiences, and we've been able to utilize that information.
Have you mentioned social media? You mentioned the bloodhounds, the German shepherds. We've seen the helicopters. What other tools are being utilized right now today out there?
Well, there's a whole array of technology that's being utilized. Again, I'm not going to go into the specifics of that. That puts us at a disadvantage when we explain everything we're doing, what the capabilities of that are. And so what I would tell you is that any available, reasonable resource is being brought to bear from not only the state police, but from the marshals, from the FBI, from the county, from any agency that possesses it. The expertise, the technology, the investigative experiences are all being brought to bear on this.
Going back to where they started, have there been other weaknesses or potential co-conspirators within the Chester County Prison that would have been able to escape in the first place? Now that this investigation's been going on.
That will, when we finally conclude this investigation, we'll be able to speak more to any co-conspirators or anything. Right now, I'm not prepared to discuss that. We've made no arrests, filed no charges in that, and so it would be premature of us to address anything like that now.
For those earlier break-ins that
Social media has been really beat up. I'm sure you've seen the comments yourself that there's hundreds of law enforcement personnel out there. There's dogs, there's drones, etc. And some people are asking, why draw the line at 200 searchers or 300 searchers? Why not just flood the zone and appeal to as many out-of-state resources as possible and get more people on the ground? What's stopping you from doing that?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, no, I don't look at the social media comments ever. Secondly, in terms of the number of people, would it satisfy them if I put 1,000? Would it satisfy them if I put 2,000 or 3,000 or 10,000? I suspect that those who criticize without the experience and the knowledge of the specifics in the investigation would not be satisfied regardless of what we did. What I can assure the citizens, the residents of these communities, are that we are doing everything possible, everything reasonable, and utilizing all available resources. If we needed 1,000 people, we would do it. Somebody mentioned freeing earlier. There were days there I had 1,000 law enforcement officers or more on any given operating period up there. If we needed that, we would have it.
Why do you feel you don't at this point?
I don't have the type of information that I would need to make the best use of all of those people. And to flood an area with unnecessary resources would interfere with people going about their daily lives. And so we're trying to find that balance of being as least intrusive as possible, while at the same time ensuring we've got every single resource we need to successfully conduct this
At this
investigation.
point in the investigation, for those earlier home break-ins within the Longwood Garden property, have you been able to confirm whether or not he actually entered anyone's home or broke into anyone's property there?
I don't have any conclusive evidence to suggest that that he was responsible for any one of those burglaries. That's not to say that he couldn't have been. I'm saying I don't have a fingerprint, I don't have DNA to say that he was the person who did the certain break-in.
Is the sister's apprehension in any way a possible warning to others who may know him, may have information that could help you, whose immigration status?
I'll let that to others to look at that and draw their own conclusion. What I would say is, if someone is thinking about offering assistance and acts on that, we will take whatever actions are appropriate based on what they've done.
There's some concern in the local Brazilian community that he's sticking around because he wants to come after people within the community. Can you talk about that fear that they're expressing and after expressing on social media?
We have no information to suggest that at all. I will tell you that without going into a lot of theory of this investigation, I believe that his actions show he's desperate. I believe that there was an opportunity to escape. I don't believe there was a lot of planning that went into that, and now he finds himself on the run. I think he is desperate. The fact that he has reached out to people with a very distant past connection tells me he doesn't have a great network of support. So I think he's desperate, and I've characterized him as that all along. And I think the longer we push him, the more resources, the more tools we bring to bear, we will ultimately capture him. He doesn't have what he needs to last long term.
So the key is determining perhaps where he led when he left that white van in northern Chester County. Do you know what direction he went, specifically the township that you're searching?
You know, I'm not there again. I'm not going to talk specifically about pieces of information that we may have gleaned. What I would say is that what I've already said. Then that is that we will continue to search in that area. The fact is, let's suppose for a moment I was to tell you he fled to the east. There's nothing to suggest that 100 yards into the wood he didn't then turn north. And so we will follow the various investigative leads that we gain and follow up on this investigation as appropriate. So, okay. I thank you again very much for your efforts in keeping the public informed, and you know, hopefully we're back here soon with a success. So, thank you.